Welcome back to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, a bold blend of coffee and movie review podcasting. My name is Nick Delaney, and I'm your show host, coffee and movie reviewer, and the guy who thinks life is going to be okay because he has a Beyoncé tour to look forward to now. In this episode, we are remembering We Are One with the long-awaited discussion of Coralie Farjat's The Substance. We'll be pairing this striking, sick, and sexy movie with a review of the iced Kinky chai from Donna Faye's Bakery in Union Market, DC. Please take a seat, stay a while, and let's talk control yourself over some coffee. Wow, hello everybody. This episode was much requested. I think this is my most requested film review I've had yet. There was a total of maybe 2 people that requested this, so thank you everyone for pressuring me to make this review. I first saw this like the night it came out, I think. It was like some night in late September last year, and I remember this movie, I wanted to go in as blind as possible. I don't even think I knew that it was a horror movie. I just sort of saw like that one trailer that was very in your face. Of course, the movie I'm talking about is The Substance. I just kind of got right into it. And I was just absolutely shocked by this movie for a variety of reasons that we will get into. And I told myself that I would review it on this podcast after I watched it, but I think I just could not even process what I had witnessed with this movie. There's so much to discuss today, is basically what I'm saying here. But I wanted to check in with everyone. How are you all doing? Yeah, I know. It's not great out there right now. The world, specifically the country that we are in, or most of us are in, America, this is a scary place right now. Clap if you're scared. Yeah. I would clap, but my microphone wouldn't like that. There's a lot happening right now, and it's really hard to have faith or hope when you look ahead at, where we could be in the next 4 years, just to throw out a random number, 4 years. It's hard to imagine where we'll be. And based on where we're standing right now, looking ahead, it can look pretty dark just based on the past, few weeks that we've had to throw out another random unrelated period of time, for example. It can look really dark looking ahead. But now more than ever, it is important to have faith and it is important to have hope because that is how we will make it. And those two things, that is how we will make change. And that is how we will change the reality that we're in to be something more pleasant. And I'm not saying to have faith and to have hope. I'm not saying that to encourage you to neglect the reality that we're in or to deny this reality or to just avoid it. When I say that, I actually mean to confront this reality. I think confronting something negative, that is one of the surest ways to create hope and positivity and light in your life. You are blazing a path forward for yourself. I think by avoiding realities, by neglecting things, we only, walk further into the darkness away from light. So all this talk of the dark side, the light side, it's all getting very dramatic, but I invite you all to hold people accountable, to have hard conversations, and to speak your mind on things, to speak out. I never feel like you're, wrong for speaking out or that you're not able to. You have that voice, so use it because it won't be like this forever. I promise it won't. We will get through this. And, in the midst of us doing the very hard things, there is still so much to be joyful about. There's so many little things to make us happy. And that's how I've been faring these past few weeks, how I've been coping, I guess is a good word. The Grammys were held the other night, and Beyonce won Album of the Year. Uh huh. All will be right in the world. All will be right. That made me so happy. I'm so happy for Beyonce, and I could not think of a more deserving album than Cowboy Carter. That album is brilliant. I've talked about it ad nauseum on this show before, but that album is so deserving of that award. I'm so happy. And Beyonce announced she's bringing Cowboy Carter on tour. Yeah, yeah. I am so excited. And I was talking to some of my friends about this, and that itself just has brought me so much joy. And to have that tour to look forward to now is just, it's everything. And it's so lovely. And I'm so excited to just have this tour be a thing in my life. Even I don't even know if I'm going to go or not. Sure am planning on going, but even if I don't end up going for whatever reason, just having this tour in the world is something to be joyful about. I also bought tickets to see Magdalena Bay, which I didn't think I would ever get to see them, but they just happened to be having a show in Richmond. So I saw it and took the opportunity. So I'll be seeing them soon. So I'm really excited about that. Imaginal Disc was one of my biggest albums of the year last year. And then, of course, Nintendo Switch 2 is coming out, and that's something to be over the moon about if you're a Nick Delaney out there. And I'm sure so many other people are excited about Nintendo Switch 2, of course. But yeah, these are just the things that I find joy in. And if you have these little things that you find joy in, I would love to hear about them. I love to hear, what makes people happy in such a crazy time to be an American. I also have quite a few plans for the show moving forward, so I just wanted to outline some of those plans right here. So next week is the show's first birthday. Oh my gosh, can you believe it? The show is turning 1 year old, and I'm planning a special surprise for this celebration. I'm not going to say what will be happening for this surprise, but it will be a double feature episode. So that is on the way, and I'm very excited about that one. It's actually an episode that I've said is happening in the past, but I never got around to it. But I can't think of a better time to put this episode out. So excited about that. And then later this month or in early March, I will be collaborating with another film reviewing podcast to talk about musicals. So be excited about that. I'll be a guest on her podcast, and then she will be a guest on mine. So we'll have two separate episodes of really cool discussions. We actually just filmed the episode for her podcast, and I can already say that it is a great episode, and I can't wait for you all to hear that one. And I'm really excited for the movie we're going to be talking about on this show. And then a bonus episode for The Room is coming soon. I had a little contest on social media. The 100th follower on my Instagram page got to choose what movie I reviewed for a bonus episode. So that follower chose The Room, and I'll be reviewing that soon. And I am very fearful of that movie. And then a 2024 awards episode is coming, likely in early March. I want this to kind of go out right along with the Academy Awards. Not to compete with them, but just to have, something for people to compare the awards to. Yeah. Definitely dragging my heels on that episode, but I will get that out, I promise. Getting right into things, Now Brewing is a luxury coffee discussion and review segment. Now Brewing in today's episode is the iced Kinky chai from Donna Faye's Bakery pop-up in Union Market, DC. Iced Kinky chai. Wow. We are getting freaky on Coffee Nick's movie picks. We are. Wow. Kinky chai. So for those of you who don't know, this is a play on a dirty chai. A dirty chai is a chai tea latte with a shot of espresso in it. And if you are a barista, you often recommend this drink to customers because it is a delicious drink. And they'll be like, "Ooh, a dirty chai. What? Ooh." And it's always like really stupid and you're like over it and you're like, "Yeah, dirty chai. Haha." But so they are playing on that sort of phenomena, I guess, and making the kinky chai. And this is different because it is half chai latte and half cold brew. So there's actually no espresso in it. So this is, I guess the idea was it was supposed to be even stronger, even dirtier. So it's kinky. But did I think it accomplished that? No. Listen, from the brief clippings I saw when I was doing my research on Donna Faye's bakery, this seems to be a small business. And bakery is in their title. I did not try any of their baked goods. Goods. I did not try any of their baked goods, although they look delicious. I did not try it. I was going out for the sole purpose of coffee. And I stumbled upon this when I was walking around Union Market. So it is quite possible that their baked goods are out of this world delicious, the best out there. However, based on this specific drink, the iced kinky chai, I was incredibly disappointed. If you had told me that I was drinking a glass of water, I might have believed you. If you had told me I was drinking, you know how when you have like a cup of iced coffee and you drink everything, but then the ice is just sitting there and it melts after a few hours and you take a sip of it, not really remembering that it's all gone, and you have like water that's like slightly tinted with the iced coffee that was with the ice. If you had told me I was just drinking a cup of that, I definitely would have believed you. I really don't know like how to sugarcoat this coffee drink, and I feel bad because I want there to be something good about this drink, but there was nothing. And I would even say this is an instance of lake water coffee. If you've listened to the show, you might have heard me use the term lake water coffee to describe coffee where the proportions were just not right and it comes out looking like lake water, kind of like a murky brown color. I would use that term for this coffee, but I think that lake water would in fact have more flavor than this did have. This was just like not good at all, and I can't believe I paid any amount of money for this. And I saw the barista working. She was so nice, and she recommended this drink to me. And I saw her make it, and it was kind of like one of those situations where she had a pitcher of the chai, she put that in the cup, and then she had a pitcher of the cold brew, and she put that in the cup, and there was the drink. And I'm not saying it has to be like an elaborate setup to get me this drink. I'm not saying that at all. But, you know, it's definitely not like made to order, like they're making this individual cup of coffee. This was very much like, okay, what drink can we make using the drinks that we already have? Like this drink did feel like an afterthought. This was really just bad. And I went out wanting to go try a new coffee place because I had an urge come over me to go to a specific chain coffee shop that I don't want to mention. There was a specific drink there that I was really, really craving. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to that chain coffee shop. I'm going to go to a small business and I'm going to try one of their drinks. And I went to this place and I had the iced kinky chai. Do you know what I did directly after? I went to that chain coffee shop anyways, and I got the drink that I was craving. Yep. I did do that. I did. And I did do what I wanted to do. I went somewhere, I tried something new, and I supported a small business. But then I just supported a huge mega coffee corporation after that. So, mission failed, maybe. Yeah, this was just really disappointing. And there is a world where I think that the concept of this drink could be really good. And I really think it was just a problem with their iced chai and with their cold brew, both lacking not even a little bit of flavor, any flavor. Because I don't know if I'm thinking about like said chain coffee shop, if they did this same concept, I think that would be really good. Like on paper, this is the type of drink that I think I would love, like a ridiculously strong coffee drink with like chai flavor. It sounds so good. Um, so yeah, I'm not. I do not recommend this drink if you happen to be near Donna Faye's Bakery pop up, but please try their baked goods. Try their baked goods. I will try their baked goods as well because I don't, like I said, maybe their specialty is just the bakery. I don't want to discourage people from supporting this place. This is what's so hard about being a reviewer. This is what I don't like doing. And it's like, ah, I I don't have any ill will. I promise. I promise. I hate being cold hearted sometimes. But all in all of that to say, I give the iced kinky chai from Donna Faye's Bakery the Nicks. So sad. I'm so sorry, Donna Faye. Whoever you are, Donna Faye, I'm so sorry. This next segment is the Coffee Thought, and this is an outlet dedicated to voice my many incoherent thoughts over a lovely cup of coffee. I have an important announcement. I have an important announcement for this Coffee Thought. Long, long ago in the Gretathon series, if you listen to that, in the Little Women episode, I was ashamed to admit that I had never read Little Women. And I vowed in that episode to read the book because for someone who researched the film Little Women and who wrote so extensively about it, I should have read the book, the source material. I'm happy to now announce that I have read Little Women. I've done it. It's done. And I have to say, what a beautiful experience reading that book was. From a Greta Gerwig angle, which I have to address first, it was really cool to see where Greta's attention went to because this is a massive book. I mean, it was originally released in two parts. It's like almost two separate stories, really. So it was really interesting to see what Greta pulled from, what she left behind, what Greta herself elaborated on, took creative liberties with. That was really cool. And I know I said this in the Little Women episode, but I just love how Greta Gerwig arranged the story and how it was cutting back and forth between childhood and adulthood simultaneously to draw comparisons and to sort of dramatize the coming of age story. I think that makes Greta Gerwig's Little Women one of the best adaptations of all time. She adapted this story so well, but going to this story itself, to the source material, this is such, it's so good. This was incredible. And I feel I feel so relieved that I've read this now, but I'm also so grateful for having read this book. I'm grateful that this book exists. This book was like, it feels like it is a handbook to life. It is so wise, and we know this. This book is a classic. It's been around for like 150 years and had much discussion and so many different adaptations. We know this, but it is just such a wise book, and it has so much to say about life that is so timeless and can be applied to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Just anything that like Marmee said, I was like, okay, so taking note, highlighting that, incorporating that into my life. Like Just the character of Marmee was so perfect, and anything she said was so profound and so moving. One thing that really surprised me about this book is how difficult it was for me to read it. And I think that's because, I've heard so much about this book, obviously, throughout the years, not just because I was researching it for a period of time, but so many people that I know that have read this book were like, oh, yeah, I loved it as a kid. I read it so many times when I was little. Really? Really? Because I do not think I would be able to read this as a child. This was hard for me to read at the age of 23 and a half. Like I had a little bit of a difficult time getting through some of this. And I know that that's in part due to the fact that this was written in the 1800s and life was just very different back then. There were a lot of like different cultural experiences and just things that they did in that society in that time period. They just used different words, different vocabulary, and everything. But this was hard to get through at some points. At some points through reading this, I was like, I actually don't know if I'll make it. It just felt really like my brain was having a hard time processing the language and everything. But I there were also other parts where it just flowed very easily and it felt very modern and everything. One thing I really liked about this book, though, I won't talk too much about it, but I just wanted to kind of touch upon it, is just all of the different character interactions that happen here. I feel like all of the sisters get to interact with one another one on one, and they also each have their own individual stories. And there's something to learn from all of those different interactions and all of those different stories. One of those interactions that I really wanted to touch on was between Amy and Joe. They sort of have an arc together in part two of the book, and they're doing something that I don't know what they're doing. It's something that they did back in the 1800s where they're like going to different people's houses, and Amy was like arranging flowers or trying to paint, and they later were like selling the flower arrangements and the paintings at art galleries. And she tried to get Joe along with her to go to these things. And she was worried because Joe doesn't have good manners and she wouldn't have conformed to like, the standards for being a lady at these things that they were going to. I'm not a historian. I'm so sorry. I really resonated with this character arc. I feel like recently in life, I've been walking down a path, and coming up on this path, it splits into two ways. One of those ways is Joe, and the other way is Amy. And I'm sure that most of you kind of know the personalities of all the different sisters, but she does not conform to the societal standards of being a woman. She is not quote unquote ladylike. She's very free spirited, very bold, very masculine in certain ways, and she's very outspoken. Whereas Amy, on the other hand, her character sort of is all about conforming to those societal standards of being a woman. But she does still have her own standards as well, as we see when she goes to Europe and meets Laurie. And we see what difference that makes for both of these characters. Specifically for Amy, she gets to reap all of the benefits of conforming to societal standards, and she gets to go to Europe. And that was originally intended for Joe by Aunt March, but Joe basically tells off Aunt March, and Aunt March instead decides to take Amy to Europe. And Joe is really bitter about it. And she's like, I don't understand. Why didn't I get to go to Europe? And I think it's Marmee that says to her, well, like, Joe, you're very outspoken and you're not going to reap all of the benefits. Like, by being outspoken, you're going to fall out of favor with some people. And while maybe that's for the best, you're not going to like exactly get to reap the benefits of being in good graces with that person. So I've kind of felt at a crossroads with these two characters. I like resonating with these two characters. I feel like in some areas of my life, I'm very outspoken, I'm very free spirited, and I don't really care what other people think. Other areas of my life, I'm very concerned about conforming and, reaping the rewards, kind of like making my life a bit easier by conforming to whatever standards. So recently, that's caused a few problems in my life. And I'm speaking for myself now. I've noticed that by conforming to standards that other people have set for me, I've sort of lost myself in a variety of different ways. I think that I've been dissociating from life a lot more often. I have not felt grounded or present from day to day because I think by conforming, I'm not voicing how I feel, and thus I'm sort of like not really creating a space for me. I'm sort of making myself smaller. And I think the more you conform, the more you sort of lose an individuality. So yeah, although it has, made things more pleasant with different people in my life, I feel like that I've lost myself a bit because of it. Whereas in other areas of my life, I'm very outspoken and I like to be very free spirited. And while that is something that I don't show to everyone in my life, because I would fall out of favor with them, it definitely makes me feel more present. It makes me feel more alive. So, reading this character arc between Joe and Amy, I sort of realized this crossroads that I'm at in my own personal story, I guess, and how I'm very much like Joe and very much like Amy, and the problems with both of those things. And I think I've realized that I identify more with Joe, and I think I value kind of like those more Joe leaning traits in myself. I value being outspoken more, and I value being, more free spirited because I think that is just what's good for me. And I think that's what's healthiest for me mentally and emotionally. And I think I need to be outspoken because I need to be present and I need to hear myself say my opinions and I need to create my own reality, if that makes sense. Because conforming just isn't good for me. But this isn't to say that conforming isn't good for other people. Maybe there's other people, out there in the world that live more like Amy and that is what's best for them. And I completely, yeah, I encourage that and support that. And that's another beautiful thing about Little Women that was definitely touched on in Greta Gerwig's adaptation in her film, how there's multiple truths for all of these different characters. Joe was very against marriage, and Meg wanted to get married and she wanted to take care of things at the house. She wanted to settle down and have a family. And I remember this specifically because of Greta Gerwig's film. She says, just because my dream is different than yours doesn't mean it's not important. So reading this book was such a great experience. I'm so glad that I finally did it. It feels like a weight is lifted off my shoulders, and I can't wait to return to the book one day too, because I have a feeling it's just one of those things where you can go back to it at any time and you will find something that you need. Oh my gosh, it's also so sad. I cried a lot. And obviously, I know that Beth dies, but I got to that part on the metro. I was reading the book on the metro and I happened to get to that chapter. It's a very short chapter. And I started crying. And I looked up from the book and there was a guy sitting across from me. And I think he saw what I was reading because he made eye contact with me and he mouthed the words, "It's okay." So thank you to that guy, whoever you are. I appreciate it. I'm going to move forward now because I could talk about this book for a long time. I'm going to move forward to the now showing. This is our feature ideological analysis and critical film review segment by yours truly. Now showing in today's episode is The Substance. Fired from her long-running television fitness show on her 50th birthday, forgotten celebrity Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, is offered a mysterious drug called the Substance when she is left feeling most desperate. The drug allows her to create a better, sexier, and younger version of herself, played by Margaret Qualley, on the small premise that the two versions of users switch every 7 days. Will the balance be respected? Oh, God. Like, where do I even start with this one? Where do I even start? This movie, this film is bonkers. It is bonkers. I deeply appreciate how far this film was willing to go. It does not hold back. It is very out there. It's very exposed. It's extremely graphic. And I love that about this movie. And it would not have worked half as much if it was not as graphic as it was. This is going to be one of those reviews that I will just not be able to cover everything. So I'm going to be very selective about what I talk about from this movie just because, wow, there is so much to talk about here. The first thing I want to say, I did watch the making of documentary for this film, and you got to see director Coralie Farja make this movie, and there were so many cool things. So all of this was filmed in Europe. None of this was filmed in LA. So they actually had to create like a fake LA, and I think they were walking through like the scenes where Demi Moore's character is walking down the sidewalk to get the substance. That was actually filmed in like a amusement park parking lot, and they just sort of like made it work using angles and like small set design and everything. But you would have never known the difference. Coralie Farja also showed like her storyboard and her script for the film, and it is so detailed. I mean, like every single shot of this film was planned in advance. And I know that's like, that happens with a lot of films. There is a shot list and everything, but she like sketched out the film and it looked so much like it does in its final product. It just goes to show you that there was such a clear vision that she had, and she made it all come true. She made it all happen. And one of the ways in which she made it happen was A, with all of the planning, but two, there was actually like an entirely different production that happened after like the actors were involved. I don't really know what to call it. It's not like post-production because they were still filming these things, but it was like they were filming all of the effects in the movie, because there are certain shots in this movie, like with the egg that grows two yolks, or with like the motorcycle crashing into the camera, or with like just glitter falling down from the sky, or with like the inside of a snow globe, or like Dennis Quaid eating shrimp. So many different things that don't actually involve the actors, and that would have taken a lot of time to portray the detail of. They filmed all of these things in what they called the lab after the actors were involved, and kind of when they had like a very restricted crew working on the film. They recorded all of these different shots that they didn't need the rest of the crew around for. It just was very resourceful. It was very cool that they were able to make this happen. And watching this documentary and seeing how they are able to create some of these images is just so incredible. Like the shot with the motorcycle crashing into the camera, that's just like a doll like that they pushed into the camera. I don't know, like, yeah, that's film 101. Like that's very standard, but it's just so cool to see how they make it happen. Or like, there were so many fake bodies that they used, and so much of like the really gruesome body horror scenes, you're not seeing any of the actors. You're seeing like a fake body that they're sticking like a syringe into or whatever. Not that I thought like Demi Moore's back split open and Margaret Qualley came out of her in real life. Like I know it's a set. It's not real, but it was really cool to see it all happen. And like, when Demi Moore's back was splitting open to birth Margaret Qualley's character, it was a puppet, and there were people under the floor pushing their hands up into this fake Demi Moore, making her back move around and everything to make it look like a person was about to come out. Very cool stuff. And I highly encourage you to watch this documentary. It's on YouTube, it's only like 30 minutes. Um, Everything in this movie is practical. Everything. It's crazy. Even the very last shot when there's sparkles falling down from the sky, that's practical. Like they actually filmed like little spark. I don't know. I just thought that would have been like computer generated or something. It's so cool that they were able to make this movie. There is so much attention and detail put into this. Altogether, this is just such a jarring and electrifying and just shocking movie. It is arranged in such a way that evokes the most effective reaction out of people, the highest reaction out of people. Even the very beginning, when we're introduced to Harvey, played by Dennis Quaid, who is the producer of Elizabeth Sparkle's TV show, horrible, horrible man. You know, just the way we see him go in the bathroom and like the angle we see of him when he's like taking a piss at a urinal and the way his voice is amplified and everything, he is automatically painted to be this character who is harsh, very vulgar, and very just sexist and awful. And then very shortly after, we get the scene with Elizabeth and Harvey at the restaurant where Harvey tells Elizabeth that she's no longer with the studio and he's eating the shrimp. And if you've seen this movie, you know what scene I'm talking about. He's eating the shrimp and like tearing it and like shoving it in his mouth and everything. Just you have to watch this movie to understand. If you've not seen it, you have to watch this movie to understand like why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. It is just all of these images that Coralie Fargeau chose to show are created and depicted with maximum effectiveness. I know I just mentioned how a character like Harvey is characterized through use of imagery and everything, but I, of course, wanted to talk about how Elizabeth and Sue are characterized as well, because I think that there are so many different decisions that are made that do a really excellent job of characterizing these two. One of these things is when we see Elizabeth, she uses like she's very old fashioned and she uses a landline telephone and she reads the newspaper a lot, which, you know, I questioned when I watched this movie the second time. I was like, wait, this does take place in modern day, right? And then Sue's character comes along and she's using a smartphone. Elizabeth's character is someone who is really feeling their age and struggling with their age and how they are being treated because of their age. They are feeling very old. So just like the way this character interacts with the world says a lot about them. Another thing that I think characterizes these two really well is the fridge. And I know that's weird, and I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but just like what's in the fridge when both of them open it up. When Sue opens the fridge, there's like Diet Coke, there's fresh produce, fruits and vegetables and everything. And then when Elizabeth opens the fridge, there's like a half-eaten rotisserie chicken that's like uncovered and all these kind of like nasty looking leftovers and everything. And I really liked this choice because it just goes with the overall message of the movie of like how all of this love and attention is given to these quote unquote like younger, sexier women, especially in Hollywood. And then it's almost like the table scraps are given to these older women who used to be that younger, sexier woman and everything. And I think this kind of leads into one of the major talking points I have, and that's just like how these two characters interact with one another. Even though they are technically like the same person, they act as two separate characters, which is the main issue of the movie. I think one way to really talk about how these characters view one another is the portraits of these two characters that we see. I think a lot of The Great Gatsby and what is that? What is that symbol in The Great Gatsby called? The Eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. It is the billboard that's like up And it's like these eyes that are always looking down. And this says it represents the divide between classes in the pursuit of the American dream. And it's like always present and everything. So this symbol from the Great Gatsby book, it reminds me a lot of Sue's billboard that eventually goes up right across from Elizabeth's apartment. And Elizabeth used to have this kind of like clear view of the, I'm assuming, LA city skyline. And then this billboard came in and it always has advertisements for Sue on it. And it's like Sue is always present. This quote unquote younger, sexier, hotter version of Elizabeth is always there, always being better than her in certain ways. But then in Elizabeth's apartment, she directly opposite to the billboard of Sue, she has this huge portrait of herself in like her fitness aerobics attire. And earlier on in the movie, I think it's like a snow globe. Yeah, the snow globe is thrown at this portrait because Elizabeth like has all this like self-loathing built up. She throws the snow globe and it hits and shatters the glass on one of the eyes of this portrait. And I think it shows how Elizabeth's view of herself is distorted by society, and like how she can't view herself properly or in a way that's rooted in reality because of just sort of like how society treats women of her age. And eventually, this portrait, I think it's taken down by Sue. Sue takes this portrait down and she puts it into like a hiding place and everything. And so then Sue's billboard is the only portrait that's present. It's like the only version of Elizabeth that matters is this younger, sexier version of her. Eventually, though, Elizabeth gets really fed up with Sue and she brings out the portrait again, sort of to stand her ground and say like, hey, no, I'm a human being. I'm valid. I'm a person. You've done enough. And at this point, Sue has caused some serious damage to Elizabeth's body, I think. And so then the two portraits are facing each other again. And it's almost like this standoff between like, who will take the priority in Elizabeth's life? Will it be this false version of her, or will it be the true Elizabeth? There's even the point where Elizabeth covers up her entire wall, her entire window, with newspapers to avoid seeing Sue, and she's trying to neglect Sue and everything. And at this moment, this is also when Elizabeth turns back on herself and she's trying to focus on herself and get her old body back. And she feels a lot of regret for taking the substance in the first place. So I really like the symbol of these two portraits. I think they represent the dynamic between these two characters really well. I also think that the billboard is a really unique choice. Like Corley very well could have just had like another portrait hanging up in the apartment of Sue, but the choice was made to have Sue be a billboard, a massive billboard outside the apartment, basically that Elizabeth has no control over. So while Elizabeth could remove the portrait of herself at any time, she can never remove the portrait of Sue. And other people get to look at the portrait of Sue, and other people see that portrait now and are looking to her instead of Elizabeth. So I think it's really showing that like you can't control what other people, basically what their attention is gravitating towards. You can't control that, but what you can control is how you respect and treat yourself and how you view yourself. Like you can leave that portrait hanging up. Like you can see that, you can admire that beautiful person in that picture, but you can't always admire what society, or you can't always control what society sees as beautiful. I think portraits also come into play here in the hallway at the studio. So people have been calling this the Shining hallway because it has like a version of the Shining carpet on it, which I think is really cool. This movie does pay respects to a lot of different horror movies, which I really like, but I'm not going to get into that today because it's just a lot. But Another use of portraits here is in that hallway. So when we start the movie, this hallway is completely filled with posters of Elizabeth's career from her past and everything. And you get to see basically like all of these different things that Elizabeth has done and like how long and notable her career has been. And then all of these portraits are removed. And when Sue comes along, there's just a single portrait of Sue in this long, empty hallway. And in a way, it kind of showed a way in which Sue is lesser to Elizabeth. Sue does not have any sort of like long-standing notable career behind her. She's just starting out. She is on the bottom in a way, whereas Elizabeth had this whole entire career she was riding off of. There were several quotes that I really like too, and I like that the substance. Yes, it was a really bad thing, but it was very upfront about what these people were getting into. Specifically, there was a quote where the substance guy, whoever he was, he said, "You are the Matrix. Everything comes from you and everything is you." I think that this is really beautiful because it's basically saying that all of this beauty that Elizabeth saw in Sue, all of this sexiness, this youth, this gorgeousness, all of this came from Elizabeth. All of this was somewhere inside Elizabeth. It was already within her. And we see that sort of externally with the character that Elizabeth was about to go on a date with, who said that, you know, he was kind of nerdy and everything, but he said that Elizabeth was still the most beautiful girl in the world. And ultimately, Elizabeth just didn't believe this about herself because of everything society was telling her. But this beauty was still in her, and there were still people out there that saw this. And I think that the scene where Elizabeth is about to go on the date is one of the most powerful and heartbreaking scenes of this entire movie. I just think that this scene is so moving, and it's performed so well by Demi Moore. Just sort of like the back and forth, and you see the time passing on the clock. You see Demi Moore putting on more makeup, trying to cover more of herself. And it just, it tells you so much without explicitly saying anything. And it's even hard to talk about now. Like, I don't exactly know what words to use to talk about the emotions in this scene and how this scene made me feel. Just such abstract feelings. So I think in the end that this film is about a cycle that keeps continuing. So at first we had Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth Sparkle, who was very self-conscious about her appearance and her age and her body, and she was feeling like she wasn't young enough, and she was made to feel that way by the producers at her work. She took the substance to create a quote-unquote younger, sexier, better version of herself, which was Sue. And by the end of the movie, Sue is made to feel like she's not good enough either, and she becomes incredibly self-conscious about her body. So she takes the substance and creates Monstro Elisa Sue. These three characters are basically the three chapters of the movie. This final chapter about Monstro Elisa Sue, if you've seen it, you know that it is just absolutely apeshit insane. It is disturbing, horrific, gory, disgusting. It is maybe like some of the most extreme things I've seen in film. This is just like ultimate body horror. But basically, Monstro Elisa Sue emerges, and she has to take the place of Sue at the New Year's Eve show that Sue is supposed to be like hosting, performing at. And right before Monstro Elisa Sue goes on stage, you get Harvey's character saying, she's one of my proudest creations. And then it's Monstro Elisa Sue, sort of referencing that Harvey created this monster. He is the one that is creating this horrific cycle of women feeling like they're not good enough. But then, of course, Monstro Elisa Sue goes on stage and everyone is horrified and they're like, oh my gosh, it's a monster. And, hard rock music happens and there's like a fountain of blood that gets sprayed everywhere, normal stuff. And I think it's really interesting. Monstro Elisa Sue, she tapes on she finds the portrait of Elizabeth Sparkle. She cuts out the face and she's wearing this giant like Demi Moore mask on her, sort of showing that she now wishes she could be just Elizabeth Sparkle. And that now is like the most beautiful thing to her, is being Elizabeth Sparkle. It's just showing how like pointless and stupid this cycle is. I don't know what else to talk about with this movie. This movie is really hard to talk about. Like I said, so much of this is dependent on like how it makes you feel in the moment. There are so many nuanced emotions that are happening here. There is so much just kind of like in your face imagery and sound design. There are like lots of really cool uses of color. There's a lot of really cool references. Like I said, with The Shining, there's a reference to Lost Highway. There is a reference to The Fly, which is like OG body horror. There's like an image of a fly drowning in a glass of white wine, sort of showing like how this is about beauty, body horror about beauty. There is, of course, a reference to Cinderella in the final act when Sue is wearing that blue dress and she has to like run away and take the substance. So many references here. This movie is just packed to the brim with meaning, but so much of it is for interpretation. Everything I just said could be different for you. This is just what I took away from it. And obviously, this movie is, a completely different experience for women, much like Little Women. I think that there is more to take away from this if you are a woman because of the societal standards that are in place. I do appreciate that there was a boy character who was taking the substance, who actually had a really great, chilling quote. He said, "It gets harder each time to remember that you still deserve to exist, that this part of yourself is still worth something, that you still mattered. Has she started yet? Eating away at you." Yeah. So I think this character is really important because it just shows like the more emphasis that is placed on these quote unquote like young, beautiful women, the harder it is to remember, as like someone who is older, that you are still worthwhile. So I really personally, I think that this film is such a strong message to everyone that there is intrinsic beauty in you that society may or may not recognize, that you have a responsibility to recognize and to safeguard, much like that portrait on Elizabeth's wall. You have to be the one that hangs it up and that admires it. There's just so much about this film. I think this is why I was pushing it off so much. This film is just really hard to talk about. And I really think that this is a film that you just shouldn't listen to this review. You turn off this review, just go watch the movie, because I really think that this is just one of those movies that you just have to see for yourself, because it's so interpretative and it's so based on like the reaction that you get watching it, on your couch or in the theater, which by the way, I think it's showing again in theaters. So yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't think there's more I can add to this or more I can keep saying. It's just very hard to talk about. Yeah, and I think that's why I was pushing it off so long. But I did have a good time finally talking about it. Don't get me mistaken. Okay, with all of that being said, I'm going to give The Substance the Nick pick. Corley Farjaw's The Substance is a larger-than-life, sparkling, monstrous, and flawless critique that is not only incredibly relevant now, but timeless. The vision and creativity of Farjaw is meticulous, one of a kind, and near perfectly executed. Stars Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley gave everything to these characters and this story, with performances that will go down in the cinema history books and nuance that brings a specific kind of real-world phenomena and emotions to life. The Substance is an unforgettable masterpiece, oozing with meaning and horrific beauty. Yeah, wow. Like I said, I think this is having a little bit of a re-release moment in theaters. Please go watch it in theaters if you have the opportunity to do so. If not, this is streaming on Mubi. Yeah, this is just such a ride, and I'm done talking about it now. In terms of the Oscars, I think that Demi Moore should win Best Actress for this role. And I think that this film should win Best Picture. All right. Moving on. This is the Dear Coffee Nick segment. In this segment, I usually read letters from fellow coffee and movie enjoyers about their own coffee and movie opinions, reviews, thoughts, hot takes, or whatever. I do not have any Dear Coffee Nick letters this week since this is a little bit of a longer episode, but if you would like to send in a letter, please feel free to write Dear Coffee Nick through DM on social media or email coffeenicksmoviepics@gmail.com. Everyone, this was a fun episode, and I feel like I ranted a lot during this episode, so thank you for bearing with me. I had a good time. And I can't wait to be putting out more episodes soon. Like I said, next week is the 1-year anniversary, the first birthday of the show, and I have something special planned. I am also trying to release things on a weekly basis. I don't know if you all have noticed, but I'm very proud. I've been keeping up with it pretty well so far. So I'm going to try to keep that up because it feels good to put things out every week. So everyone, thank you for listening to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Before you go, please be sure to follow at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and at Coffee Nick on Blue Sky. There you can stay up to date on everything about the show. If you like what you heard, please rate the show on your podcast app of choice and share the show with your friends. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, and in the meantime, take care of yourself. Thanks again for listening to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Our opening theme is The Moondrops, and our closing theme is March of the Hares, both songs by Nathan Moore. Before you go, please be sure to follow the show on social media at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and TikTok, and give the show the Nick Pick by rating it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thanks again, and see you next time.